I built my life around this bright idea. I built my life around this insight I found. Hello and be welcome to another episode of Let's Develop Bright Ideas. Today's insight is about how to test when writing applications with some kind of framework. So I was recently talking to my flatmate and he said, look, I'm developing this kind of web service that's placed in some kind of framework, and I developed this web service test-driven. So I have all these tiny little unit tests that test my actually web service logic. And now I want to deploy that, which means I have to ensure that my web service actually works in the context of the framework. So I find myself repeating all the tests that I already wrote on a unit test level, on an integration test level, again, to speaking to the framework which has my web service embedded, in order to ensure that this works as well. And for once, this feels kind of redundant because I have all the tests on the unit test level and now I write them again on the integration test level. And to the other part, it's not so interesting to do because most of the times, you're just writing tests and they work because I already tested the functionality, and so that my motivation to write this test is actually much less. And I thought about this one for a moment because I must admit that it feels kind of intuitive to write this integration test level to ensure that the integration between my unit and the framework actually works. But in the end, I think it's the wrong thing to do because we're not actually testing the functionality of our web service. We already got that implemented and covered by our unit tests, right? So what we're testing is actually our expectations on the framework with this integration surrounding integration level test thing. We test the expectations on the framework in order to ensure that when we interact with the framework, it will interact with our web service thingy in the way we expect it to do, in the way we encode it as kind of a contract in our unit tests for this thingy. So what I think we should do instead of doing this integration level testing is we should write exploratory tests, mock away our web service unit, and write these exploratory tests that ensure what kind of interaction we can expect from the framework. This has two advantages. For once, we get to know what the framework actually does, because we might not know. So it's a good thing to start and get to know the framework. Second, we don't have to repeat the tests we already wrote on the unit test level, or we might be going to write on the unit test level. And this builds us an exploratory test suite, which allows us to, for example, switch to another version of the framework, run our exploratory test suite, and see if our expectations, the ones we encoded in the unit tests for our web services, actually still hold with a different version of the framework. So it even gives us kind of a security net for updating framework versions to ensure that our application will still work because our assumptions towards the framework still hold. To wrap it up, I think if you work in some kind of a framework, which is usually kind of a black box thing to you, you should write unit tests for the entity you place within the framework, and you should write exploratory tests that make sure the framework behaves the way you expect it to, or if it doesn't, make sure you adjust your expectations to what the framework actually does. Okay, that's my 2 cents on this topic. I hope you liked the idea. Give me some feedback about what you think. Drop me a message, send me a comment, and of course, give me a thumbs up if you like the idea. I hope to see you next week.